Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Big news from Tesla, from Starlink. In addition to that, we also have some governments warning you about cyber attacks and the electricity going out. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall for the week, the biggest piece of news was the notification from the central bank, the Fed, that said that they're most likely going to drop interest rates in 2024. That sent a lot of the stocks absolutely flying. I believe it was on Thursday when they announced that stocks had their best day since 2009. And so basically what's happening is, remember that the interest rates basically govern what happens to our economy. If they go up really fast or they stay really high, it's a lot harder for the economy to move, since the U.S. economy is almost 70% consumer spending. What are consumers? People buying houses, buying cars, buying toys, buying things at the store, all of that. Obviously, we had a little bit of a different situation this time in regards to inflation, because it was kind of both of those kind of hitting at once. But now supposedly the inflation is coming down. So now it looks like in 2024, we'll start to have the drop in those interest rates, because obviously we have to get the economy going, because there's a presidential election to win. The Tuesday, most of the markets hit 52-week highs. The Dow, and if I'm not mistaken, the NASDAQ also hit a record high this week. All of the U.S. markets were positive. Canada was also positive as well. And one of the things I thought really interesting this week, since I've been in this industry for so long, learning how to trade and looking at patterns on charts, I kind of have become accustomed to kind of seeing these patterns, right? That's why I always talk to you guys about those conspiracy theories that are never going to happen. And I thought it was unusual this week that the movie came out on Netflix. If you guys haven't seen it, called Leave the World Behind, very good. I think it's a little bit of predictive programming of what's to come. But that movie basically, attack on the U.S., the electrical grid goes down, that whole nine. Well, there's a government official in England that warned the people in the UK that they need to prepare for a cyber attack and a power grid failure. They talked about stockpiling batteries, candles, torches, and radios. In addition to that, there was news that Mark Zuckerberg is developing a $270 million fortress in Hawaii with an underground bunker and escape latch. So, I don't know about you, but if Zuckerberg is planning for the end times, then maybe you should, build a little cabin in the woods or whatever you want to do. Overseas market news: India's stock market value is now larger than Hong Kong, so it has become now the 7th largest in the world. That's no feat, because remember that Hong Kong is, at least used to be before China, one of the biggest financial hubs in the world. There's a lot of optimism about the country. They've been the fastest growing country in terms of percentage of GDP every year for the last 2 years. And the IMF, with their reports that are always wrong, are also expecting them to be the fastest growing country for the next 2 years. The Nifty 50, which is the India stock market, that reached a record high this week. European markets are mostly mixed. The FTSE in London, well, actually I should say most of the markets were positive. There was just 1 or 2 negatives in there. Latin America, mostly mixed as well. The exchanges of Mexico and Brazil, the 2 largest markets in Latin America, reached record highs. And the Merval, which is controlled by the only libertarian in the world, went down. I have some news on that. He already got rid of all the ministries, the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Equality, so everybody can be the same poverty rate, basically. That joke is a lot funnier in Spanish, but anyway. Markets in the Middle East and Africa, mostly mixed. Saudi Arabia was the biggest winner there. And then we have Asia and Australia, the far east, overall positive. Australia being the biggest winner there as well. Bitcoin and crypto, the SEC, which is the regulatory framework in the United States that governs stocks and other financial things, denied Coinbase's petition requiring transparent rules in regards to crypto. They denied that petition, meaning that Coinbase, the largest exchange for crypto in the United States, asked the SEC, hey, can you give us some clear rules that we can follow? And then they denied that request. Well, now Coinbase is suing the SEC to try to get transparent crypto regulations. And why I think they don't do that is because what they want to do is that whenever they want to go after the crypto people, they're just going to go after them for some random thing that wasn't transparent to begin with, and then they could go in and take over the whole market like what the institutions are doing now. And then they can say, well, it wasn't clear. It's like, well, that's your problem. It's not our problem. That's how the government works. Bitcoin for the week is down 4.89%. It's down to 42,180. In commodities, the oil market reached the lowest level in the last 6 months on concerns of oversupply. So a lot of people in the industry now are starting to see that the economy isn't moving as fast as everybody's saying it was going to. So obviously that implies that people aren't going to use as much oil. That's part of the reason why the oil mafia, OPEC, decided to cut production, because, the expectation is that there's not going to be as much consumption, including China, for example, which is the second largest economy in the world. They're having some economic problems, and they are also the largest importer of oil in the world. So if the largest importer of oil in the world, the economy isn't doing well, the United States economy also isn't moving like it should, supposedly. That means that there's probably not going to be that much demand for oil. And supposedly we're going to be walking into a recession next year as well. U.S. crude for the week went down 0.28% to 71.43. It was positive 0.28. And international went up 0.93% to 76.55. The Chinese pork prices have gone down 6% last week, with concerns about deflation in the Chinese economy. The deflation, meaning the opposite of inflation, or when prices go down, is not good for a government due to the fact that, remember that the goal of government is just to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. And obviously, if the prices of things go down, that means that the government's going to get less money, which means that they have a huge hole, because all these three-letter agencies want to do is just continue to grow and tax you. So not a good problem to have. There's been mine closures and ongoing disruptions in the copper market. That's created a bit of a bottleneck for copper supplies. So the copper prices in London now are at a 4-month high. And gold and silver, we had a bit of a whipsaw last few weeks for gold and silver, right? We have a lot of good economic news right now, but obviously with the Fed admitting that they're going to decrease interest rates next year, that provides less demand for the dollar, which means that the value of the dollar goes down, which means that gold and silver actually go up. Gold went up 0.76% to 2020 with 90 cents, while silver went up almost 4% to 23.97. But for the most part, it's still kind of within that same range. It hasn't really broken out yet. Financial and banking news: the consumer prices in China fell the fastest in 3 years in November. Factory gate deflated as well, meaning that the prices of the products at the gate where they leave the factory actually went down as well. This is indicating weak domestic demand, as costs a lot of doubt in regards to the economic viability, or the recovery, I should say, of China. So China's not doing well, right? And remember, United States is overall still the largest economy in the world. After that is China. And then after that, kind of Europe, even though it's not a country, they're in the same economic block because of the euro. The third largest in the world actually is Europe. And then after that, Japan. The China's PPI, which is the production price index, sorry, I got a brain fart there for a second, went down 3% year over year in November. And the largest U.S. bank in the United States, Chase, is starting to overhaul its branches due to the fact that they need to assimilate First Republic Bank. If you guys remember, that was the bank that failed. I believe it was this year. So they have over 4,800 branches across 48 states. So now they kind of need to organize all of the branches that they had with this new bank that they assimilated. The government of Argentina, with the new government, libertarian government of Milei, devalued the peso by 50% to 800 USD to 1. They cut energy subsidies and also canceled tenders of public works. The new economic minister, Luis Caputo, said that they're going to need a little bit of economic shock therapy. And he noted that of the last 123 years, 113 of them, the country has run a deficit. Part of the reason why they have triple-digit inflation is because They just don't have enough money to pay their bills. So what do they end up doing? Just printing more money. And a country like Argentina and most other countries around the world don't have what's called a reserve currency. The reserve currency is something like the United States has, for example, which may change very soon, where people essentially need the currency or are accustomed to using the currency in their normal business, let's say. And classically, after the petrodollar was established in the 70s, I believe, or 60s, one of those decades back in the day, I don't have the exact date. Essentially, if Brazil was going to pay, Germany, or Germany was going to pay Russia, or South Africa was going to pay the Canada, they would always convert to dollars because everything was listed in dollars, essentially. And so that is going to change very soon. And the problem that most people talk about, or don't see, I should say, is that most of the dollars that have been created, if I'm not mistaken, it's over 90% are outside of the United States. So as more and more countries decide to do direct swaps with their own currencies, what's going to happen to all those dollars? All those dollars are just going to get dumped back into the United States or back in the supply. And remember what happens with supply and demand. If there's a lot of supply of something, generally a product becomes cheaper. Whereas something that doesn't have a lot of supply, something like a Rolls Royce, for example, or, a limited edition Pokemon, whatever, then that generally is a lot more expensive, right? That's kind of what's coming very, very soon. They have a fiscal deficit of 5.5% GDP. So him being a libertarian, he wants to balance the budget. And it's going to be a little bit difficult because obviously he doesn't have the government in his favor. And for the last 70 years, they've been voting for socialists on the left that have been skimming off the top, if you know what I mean. U.S. consumer prices unexpectedly rose in November, edged up 0.1% last month. It's at 3.1% after rising to 3.2% in October. U.S. production prices gained in November as well, 0.1%. So at the production level, we're at 2.5. At the consumer level, we're at 3.1. But remember the Five Guys story that I always share with you guys. It's not really 3% now, is it? Right? Economic news, India, world's fastest growing economy, major economy in the last 2 years. The IMF, which never predicts anything right economically, also said that they're going to expect them to be the fastest growing in the next 2 years as well. The U.S. economy grew by 5.2% in quarter three. Growth is now cooling, however, and most economists don't expect a recession right now, but a lot of them are expecting in 2024. And initial claims for state unemployment benefits dropped 19,000 to a seasonally adjusted 202,000. That essentially means that the economy is doing better than what people expected. If the initial claims, meaning that people who lost their jobs or are starting to ask for those unemployment claims, if that goes down, that means that there's less people that want that kind of security from the unemployment, right? So that means that the economy is unexpectedly doing well based on the numbers that the Fed looks at. And that's why they're most likely going to look to drop the interest rates next year, because as things start to get worse, they need to do a little bit of a help program by dropping the interest rates. Corporate news, Starlink, Elon Musk's space internet company, tripled their traffic in 2023, crowning Elon Musk as now the leader in the space internet space. Shake Shack surged almost 10% after it was reported that the CEO is going to retire in 2024. And Tesla is, quote unquote, recalling 2 million vehicles to install new updates. I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's a huge attack on Elon Musk from all sides. SpaceX, for example, was sued by the Department of Justice for not hiring enough non-Americans, even though the United States has regulations saying that SpaceX can't hire non-American for national security concerns. So after he bought Twitter, X, for example, since they didn't allow him to keep censoring people that talk bad about the government, that's probably why they're starting to go after him. All they needed to do was just deploy a new update to ensure that there's new security features and other alerts in regards to their autopilot system, since the government wanted them to do that and they had some concerns about the autopilot system. And there was also a piece of news in SpaceX in regards to there was a government contract that was awarded to SpaceX to be able to implement rural high-speed internet, rural broadband internet, and the government canceled that contract 3 years before they needed to comply with the actual mandate in the contract. So just like, coming from all sides. Elon Musk is also planning on starting a new university in Austin, Texas, most likely because what's happening with all the communist and socialist universities in the United States. Trade news, bulk grain shippers in the United States are starting to take longer routes that don't pass through the Panama Canal. They're trying to avoid the congestion. If you guys don't know, the Panama Canal has had a really bad situation with a drought, so they haven't been able to fill up or use as much water to be able to get the boats to pass. If you guys don't know how the Panama Canal works, it goes from the Caribbean, and it might be backwards in the video actually. So it comes from the Caribbean and then it connects to the Pacific. So in between, there's a series of locks, and then the water is leveled, right? So a boat passes from here, then it levels out, then here levels out. And since they don't have enough water because of the drought, then obviously it's becoming a pretty serious issue. That's going to make a lot of the transport most likely a lot more expensive. And one of the interesting things I actually read about is that Colombia actually had an idea of building their own canal from the Atlantic to the Pacific as well. Technology, too cold for electric vehicles. Norway has brand new electric buses that are paralyzed due to the fact that they can't work in freezing temperatures. I thought another thing that was really interesting this week is that there was the COP28, which is the Global Warming Conference in Dubai. And due to the warming that's happening all around the world, there were jets in Munich that could not take off because they were frozen on the runway. So the people that are going to a conference about global warming can't get there because it's colder than normal in Germany. Ironic. A rocket developed by Land Space Tech launched 3 satellites into orbit. It's a new Chinese company that's trying to develop a new way to get to space, especially using methane. And it's a little bit complicated. I'm not a rocket scientist, but essentially it's really difficult to get the propellant to be able to go into space due to the atmospheric changes and all those things. And they're trying to develop this new way of doing it. That way it would slash the prices of being able to go into orbit. And Cybertrucks are worrying U.S. safety experts that could hurt pedestrians and also other cars in regards to how the Cybertruck is actually built. The Cybertruck can't even be sold, for example, in Europe due to the fact that there's a law or regulation in Europe that talks about how it needs to have rounded corners. And the beautiful Cybertruck obviously doesn't have much of rounded corners, but the cold roiled stainless steel, it'll even withstand bullets. You can kick it and it won't dent, and so they're concerned about the safety of people. Starting at $61,000, it's not going to be a mass-produced car, but Elon Musk says that it could get to 250,000 vehicles a year by 2025. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Sorry for the bad audio or the bad visuals. I'm traveling right now and didn't bring the camera with me, so see you next week. Ciao.